So this recording will cover data loading for items. So in my Getting Started Start Center, there's a link to the item master. This is where you define your items. And from here, we'll do like we've done with other data loads. We'll create a spreadsheet of items to import into Maximo Fundamentals. So if I jump over to my spreadsheet, there's a sample row here with a limited set of columns and for items, and then like other spreadsheets, there's the tab that has the instructions. So it talks about loading items, and as I scroll down here, you'll see that it describes the fields. Now the number of fields listed here is what I would consider to be a minimum set of fields. A handful are required. One thing to always keep in mind, fields, oftentimes the business object, when you load a record, be it items or persons and any set of data, whether it's through this data loading utilities or through the application, the business object underneath will often default a value into a field. So many fields, even though they're not loaded, they will be populated after an item is created because of a default provided by the business object. So let's start by looking at the fields here. So obviously there's an item number, and then there's a concept of an item set. In fundamentals, you have only one item set, so therefore it's always defined as item set. Then you have a description, which is a short description, and then you have a field for a longer description if you need it. Then there are two unit of measures, one for issuing and one for ordering, and a predefined set of order units are provided with the solution, and those can be viewed from the item application, and you can also add additional order units and issue units as needed. I'll jump down. The last field is the status field. There's a set number of statuses that are listed below the table, and you can pick one. In most cases, depending if you're ready to use the item as soon as you load it, then you would set it to active. One other field there is the rotating flag. Now this is a field that identifies an item as a rotating item. The rotating flag drives behavior that if you do as an example, if you do a purchase order for a rotating item and you purchase 10, upon receipt, you'll be asked to give additional information in order for the system to create 10 assets. So basically you're purchasing an item that in turn generates individual asset records. And so if you set the flag as true, which is a value of 1, then you've created a rotating item. If you set it to 0, which is false, then it's a non-rotating item. Now, one thing I also wanted to point out here, when you look at the list of fields, this, like I said earlier, this is obviously a small list of fields. One thing you can do, and this, I'll do it for this application, but it really applies to any of the applications. If you determine that there's additional fields related to items that you want to include as part of your data loading, you can add those fields to the spreadsheet. One way to do this is to go to the item application. I'm going to start a new item, and just for this example, what I'm going to do is look here, and you can see there's a flag here called inspect on receipt. And what that means is if it's obviously a Boolean flag, and what it means is if you purchase this item, when it goes through this receiving process, there's an additional step required to do an inspection, and the system enforces that during receiving. Now, if I wanted to provide a value, if I had items and I wanted to set that, so if we don't provide it in the input file, the flag is going to be null or off. If I want to set that flag for some of the items that I'm loading, then I need to add that field to my spreadsheet. Now, the way you figure this out is if you put your cursor in the field and then you select the field help, which is if you hit the Alt key and the letter I, it pops up a dialog and gives you a brief description. But more importantly, for the data loading aspect, it gives you the name of the table and the column. And since we're loading items, the table is the item table, and the field is called inspection required. So what I can do is come back to my spreadsheet, and I can open a new column, and I can put my column name in there, and I'm going to set the flag as true for 1. And so that's how you can add additional columns to your spreadsheet. So I'm going to save my spreadsheet, and I'm going to, like the other data loading, I'm going to do a save as, and I'm going to change the type to be a CSV and save that. And now I have a CSV file saved on my system that I'm going to use for importing. So let me jump back to the application. Going back at the list, and I'm going to choose application import, and I'm going to select the item CSV file that I just created. Start an import as that one item. And we can see it created here. We can see the rotating flag. We can also see that flag I added in, additionally the inspect on receipt. So that's how you go through adding items. When you do an item import, it is limited to 500 records per load. So you need to import your items in groups of 500 or less in case you have large volumes of data to import.